of the year, many people make new commitments to be healthy, to start new habits, or be mindful about choices that lead to peace and happiness. Part of any wellness journey must include an important pause point around mental well-being. Carrying the weight of a society that does not always feel open is a burden. I found myself wondering if we are facing something new or if this is an old challenge. In part one of this two-part episode, I sat down with a Princeton University student and the CEO and manager of an African tech startup. We will hear Robeson's singing voice in a film soundtrack juxtaposed against a classic freedom song as well. We are bridging the gaps between the 1930s and the 1940s and today. We will also gain insight on Robeson's global citizenship as he talks a little bit about why African unity was an ideal pursuit in the mid-20th century. It is Black History Month. What a wonderful time to spend time reflecting on our past as we look forward to our future. This is the Paul Robeson House of Princeton podcast, where we are working to make Robeson a household name. I am Dr. Joy. Our first guest is a graduating senior from Princeton University. Moses Njuguna, an engineering student, is a friend and mentee of board member Dr. Larry Alfs. We sat down to talk about his journey to this moment and how he stays balanced. Let's listen in. Dr. Alfs, he is a board member of the Paul Robeson House of Princeton, and he's one of my favorite humans. So if you don't mind, please introduce yourself and tell me about how it is that you came to know Dr. Alfs.
My name is Moses Njuguna. I am originally from Kenya. I was born there, and then I was later adopted into a Kenyan family who had my adoptive father was in the British Army, so we moved around a lot during that time. I got to experience sort of international schools, so the accent is still catching up sometimes. And then, yeah, I came to Princeton for my undergraduate studies in applied math. And then I just happened to be researching an area that required someone with psychiatric and pharmaceutical knowledge. So I reached out to a couple of folks in the Princeton area, and Dr. Alfs immediately offered himself up, and he was like, I would love to help out with this. So I was part of his team that presented. We had a conference in Miami where we basically presented the findings of our project. And yeah, that is how I came to know Dr. Alf. I was sort of providing the primer that was needed for an audience that's sort of used to more standard statistical approaches. They're not really, they're seeing these AI algorithms for the first time. So just like, drawing the gaps between what we've used and what is to be introduced and how it is to improve our current methods and analyses.
That is incredible. That is incredible because, again, everything, especially since we had this conversation in 2023, to project in this way and actually say we are here. So, so many people are afraid of artificial intelligences and
Right.
or generative technologies, machine learning, because they're tying it to something like the Matrix. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, we're already in the Matrix. And the idea of mining data for good is, to me, I think, the 21st century challenge, that if as communities of thinkers, as communities of people who are thinking, begin to recognize that the 19th and 20th century mandate to be more humane, I think we're going to be able to address some of that with these technologies, which is really so. I mean, well, tell me more about yourself. Who is Moses? I see class of 2025. What comes next for you?
Yeah. First of all, I want to go back to something you said because I think it's really important to mention this. Yeah, I think, there's obviously a lot of room for optimism in how like we can take charge of these technologies and mold them towards, being human first solutions.
Mhm.
But there's also, and you mentioned the 20th century. We know that there are sort of these divides, class divides, wealth divides that were exacerbated by the arms race. So technology has never really been 100% good. And now you're talking about, there's the artificial intelligence race that's between countries that are already really far ahead in their progression, which which again goes to further whatever divide exists between, for example, the West and the global South, even countries within the West. It's just there's a lot to consider, and that's why we need so many people to be aware of what these technologies are, to understand them within their scope, their full scope. Just to be, yeah, because I think awareness is the only solution to this. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, but back to
That's powerful. The idea that awareness as a solution,
yeah,
whereas normally awareness would be considered the entry point into a conversation. You're like, no, no, no. Awareness is the solution. And I think,
yeah.
wow, that's powerful, Moses.
Thank you. I I do have some things that are quite knowledgeable. Although
No,
definitely, yeah.
I never doubted that. I mean, to come into the conversation saying, "Well, I had a primer for this," and I'm like, "Wait a minute, what?" Because again, this is an important generational difference.
Yeah.
And I consider myself a cusper as a Gen Xer. I sit between folks who had limited technology and or who grew up with their primary technology being a television, and where we are today, where television is on its last leg, right? It's fighting its last stand.
It really is. Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, is TV going away? Wait, what? Because again, the idea of that body of knowledge being stuck in a box, as opposed to the capacity of streaming technology to sort of be digitized and distributed in microseconds. Like you don't have to press it onto a film in order for it to exist and reach all the people.
Yeah.
And of course, this podcast looks at historical media, so we always take time to tie in media from Paul Robeson, who he was a cusper between the 19th century and the 20th century. And he made very intentional choice to walk away from film, which was the high technology of his day, so that his voice could be amplified differently. And I often wonder, what would that mean for him had he lived to see this moment? Sort of jump from mid 20th century into the 21st century and say, I know this is coming. Because I think that he was almost prophetic in his understanding of where we would be on a social front. So what do you think about where we are? Let's take, we are now in the future. What would you tell someone in the past? What would you tell our ancestors, family members from the 1900s, aka
Yeah.
20th century, about this moment?
I've often thought about this. I've thought about the fact that, like, literally, if we had like a Back to the Future type of thing happening, I think the first thought that a person from the past would be having would, be something to the effect of, like, what is wrong with these people? Why are they constantly on these toys? Like, it seems like everyone's walking around, with this little device in their hand, and you can be in a room and no one's talking to each other.
Mm,
Um, so I think it's a very complex question because on one hand, I always try not to be the type of person who's like, oh, we had it so much better like 20 years ago or 30 years ago with music, like social well-being, everyone was so much happier because in actuality there were so many problems that have come, to be better as we exist right now. Things like access to better healthcare, despite it not being to the level it should be. Like less people are dying today than 30 years ago, and people are living
True,
longer,
true.
right?
And I don't think people realize that. It's easy
Right.
to forget.
Yeah, so there's so many, great improvements that have come from technology. But I think as an initial reaction, especially for a sort of like an activist of sorts of social engagement and community, it can be very off-putting to find yourself in the 21st century and look at, kids in their rooms doing chat GPT or
Mm,
online online dating or online chatting as opposed to being out there, right?
mm,
Yeah, so I
mm.
guess that's what I would say. I would be frightened, honestly. I think I would want to, live in my own little bubble or isolate myself, similar to what Paul Robeson did. I would probably do the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the sort of like, okay, I'm going to take myself out of this
Yeah.
and try and make sense of it independently.
Right.
And at the same time, I think that when we do that, we lose. So it's finding the balance between reckoning by yourself and making sense of things as an individual, and then how you fit within this larger ecology of stuff that is happening all around you. I think if you had to tell your younger self, so now I'm going, let's go back to you in
Yeah.
particular, your younger self, what message would you want you to know about this moment that you're dealing with right now?
That's a really, yeah, that's a deep question for sure. I think for starters, social distancing as being a matter of public health rather than, quite literally distancing yourself from society,
Mhm.
is really important because I think the lack of consideration towards the effect on the social well-being of, us as human beings has led to so many problems, right? You've got, I'm personally not on social media, so perhaps that's another thing that I would tell myself, like just only be on social media for like a month and then get off of it because
Jump off.
just jump off exactly because it has gotten to a really really bad point and some of the things again that you mentioned about just having time to reflect and think about like where you are in the context of who you were like 10 years ago and what you see yourself in the next like 5 or 10 years to come as um, that's taken away by the constant scrolling and the constant like being in this other space online. So I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, one of the things that I know is bound to happen in the next couple of years, people will just, look up and they will have this moment of, like self reconciliation and they'll
Yeah.
think to
Their
themselves,
own
who am I?
ahas.
Right? Like who have I become and why am I
Mhm.
spending so much time away from everyone else? What has led me to be this person so full of hate and distractions and just lacking in my own vitality. Like I was so out there as a child. I had so much energy, I had so much creativity. Where has that all gone? I think
Woo.
that would be the ultimate question. And now the sad part is there's going to be a bunch of people that are going to come in and say, well, look, you don't have to worry because, you can solve all of that by buying an AI friend or building an
Yeah.
AI
Yeah.
family, right?
A
There's
digital friend.
a digital friend or a digital memory album where you can just look through your memories and live in the past and ignore the present. So there's always going to be people who are going to be looking for market opportunities to exploit that pain. But yeah, to answer your question, I think I would tell myself to like even at that young age be very, very um, intentional about putting myself out there, not relying on social media as my sole means of connecting to the world.
Mm.
And being cautious because again, not everything that glitters is gold. With technology, you always have to be aware. I think growing up, I was more so appreciative of the fact that I even had a family. My life
Mhm.
could have been way worse.
Mhm.
But as I mature, I do give myself the opportunity to reflect on some of the parts that I wish to have changed about my family. And
Mhm.
really, this is sort of what um, continues to define or to construct this proper definition of a family for me. It's never going to be perfect. Obviously, you're dealing with people. You can't have a perfect system, but I think,
Exactly. People,
yeah,
not so
people are
perfect.
people. Yeah,
Gotta love them.
gotta love them. But I think for me, the support has been in community and friends and being able to choose who you surround yourself with.
Well, I think that is an excellent way for us to sort of culminate our conversation because for me, I feel like family or friends are the family that you get to select,
Right.
and community is the home that you find both. And I think, it's wonderful to have you a part of our Princeton community. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I think it's as I said, awareness is really the solution, and it's so important to have these discussions during these times. And community also is really a key part of how we get through, any times in general, but specifically these times that we're dealing with.
You absolutely. Recorded in 1942 on Columbia Records' Songs of Free Men, The Purest Kind of Guy is side one of the well known album containing Joe Hill.
Oh, yo, yo, yo. Oh, yo, yo, yo. Oh,
The Killing Song, recorded in 1935 as part of the Sanders of the River soundtrack, is clearly not about freedom. It is well known that Sanders of the River was the last film in which Robeson played a leading role. Controlling how his voice and likeness would be used to tell stories was critically important to him and his family. Representing Africa and Africans honestly and without stereotype became part of his work for the rest of his life. Natalino Imwenda, founder and CEO of African technology company Rosello, also sat down with me to talk about Paul Robeson and his legacy. With his manager Jacob, we walk through Robeson history, tying together thoughts and ideas about where we are in society today. Let's listen in. I'm so excited because I get a chance to talk to people from all over the world, actually, and that would include you. And it's largely because we have amazing people that work with us at the Paul Robeson House of Princeton. So, Dr. Larry Alves connected us. Can you first introduce yourselves and then tell me what your connection is to Dr. Alves?
Oh wow! Okay, so I'm Natalino. I guess we're going to be talking about. I'm assuming we're going to be talking about Rosello today because that's the initiative that touches health, I suppose. But we can talk about a lot of other things as well. So I'm Natalino. I'm
Absolutely, I hope
the
so.
in this call, I will take the title as a founder of Rosello. Usually, I just go by just an executive director. Jacob is also on the call. Jacob is a managing director slash CEO at Rosello, so I technically report to him, even if I founded the company. And he's obviously a lot more switched on, I guess, when it comes to matters of health on a corporate level. I guess on a personal level, I could be your guy. So, right, Dr. Alves. Wow. Okay. So first and foremost, I've been into Princeton many, many times. I've spent many Christmases there or summer or something along those lines. Dr. Larry Alves is actually my father-in-law. So I'm married to his daughter, Sarah. Met her out here in Tanzania. And he's sort of been a really awesome champion, I suppose, or a cheerleader. Bad use of words, but he's
No,
kind of seen.
I think it's absolutely appropriate because
Okay,
that's part of his personality. In getting to know him, he is a
right.
cheerleader. He's an advocate. He's an agent of change, and his eyes, he's able to see things that a lot of people can't. So
Yeah, he's obviously he's my father-in-law, so I've gotten to know him over the years, and he's actually gotten to see me. I think when I started Rosello, I think the first time that we're actually coding Rosello, the first website, I was actually coding it in his basement in Princeton. That's just before we got our initial investment. We'll tell you all about that. And I remember like running up to the living room to him, be like, hey, I just managed to code the first. So he's kind of seen Rosello from like that initial stage to what it is right now. So it must be pretty interesting in his eyes as well.
excellent. So
Yeah.
Jacob, CEO, what's that mean? Tell me, how'd you get into this? I mean, I can certainly see the first, but what's your connection?
Well, so I'm Jacob, as Nathan introduced me. I'm managing director for Cello. Been working for Cello for almost 8 years now. So started with Rosello from a finance background, and then kind of like worked my way up to the operations. And today, I'm the managing director, overseeing the operation of Rosello actually across different markets.
So I'm curious about, I know one of the passion projects of Dr. Alf's, and certainly that we are focusing on in the coming years, is how Paul Robeson's legacy advances from the 19th and 20th century into the 21st. And one of the key elements that we talk about is representation and how he used his voice as a change agent, but also the reality of mental health and making sure that there are pathways for people who have been oppressed, who have been traumatized by tragic lives, to find outlets to peace and inlets for harmony, if you will, right? So the juxtaposition of hard and soft, whole and healthy. And so I'm really and how we can leverage human and artificial intelligence to bring all of it together. So I don't think that many people in the world who are, let's say, my age and older, fully understand where we are in the 21st century, and the bridge to our history may be tied through technology to all of these conversations. So, what are your thoughts about any of that or all of that? Tell me more. What do you all do?
Before I start answering, I can start, Jacob, if you want.
Yeah,
Um,
please go ahead.
Before I start answering, I already know this is going to be a very interesting conversation. But before I start answering, I got a question for you, Joy. Can I call you Joy?
Yes, please.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Mr. Robinson, if I can call him that, right?
Absolutely. So
Right.
Paul Robeson was born in 1898 to a formerly enslaved man who became a preacher in Princeton, New Jersey. Now, if you know anything about Princeton, New Jersey, in the traditions of elite schools, it would be included. And there are lots of ways to think about that. Many have said Princeton is the southernmost Ivy League college, Ivy League university, and with a direct connection to the pain and trauma of Southern United States. Like that's one of the things they say. Nestled in a traditionally, historically Black neighborhood was this church, or is this church called Witherspoon Presbyterian Church. And Drew Robeson Paul Robeson's father was the pastor of that church. To this day, he is the longest presiding minister in that congregation. I think he was there for 20 years. At any rate, Paul Robeson was born in the home where the Robesons lived, and it is on the corner of that historically Black neighborhood. So Paul Robeson spent his early childhood in this neighborhood, went to schools, and there are still people from that time, because it's a historic neighborhood, that knew Paul Robeson or had been taught. So his teachers, for example, their grandchildren are now older, but they are still in the community. So it's that kind of thing. So that's what attracted me to this part of the community. But as I learned, Paul Robeson and his family were there. They had tragedy. He was kicked out. The pastor was kicked out. Paul and his family left Princeton, and then he began his life in Central Jersey. He went to Rutgers. He had all of these amazing things. He was a decorated athlete, a brilliant orator. But it is when he went to New York, he went to Columbia University to become a lawyer. He became a lawyer, or got his degree, tried to be a lawyer in the 1920s, and was never really allowed to practice. He met Eslanda Robeson, who was a chemist. That's my background. I have a degree in chemistry as well. He met Eslanda Robeson. They got married, and that's when his career began, because his wife was like, you know what? You're talented. Your voice is amazing. Kill the lawyer part, right? And do the artist part. So his career in art began in the 1920s. His wife became essentially his manager, and they changed the world. He became a global citizen in that moment because he did Shakespeare, and he started singing all kinds of songs. He knew like 20 languages. He sang songs in more than 20 languages, and was fluent speaking in several, I'll say 6 or 7. But always he wanted to use his art to tell a story about Black Americans. And so that's why many of his recordings are of Negro spirituals, right? Which would have been the preeminent music of the time. And it was in direct contrast to the minstrelsy that was also propagating at the time. So once he started traveling all around the world because of Jim Crow laws and things in the United States, he became an ally of other labor groups all around the world. Most notably, many people think about his relationship with the Welsh miners in Europe, but then as he traveled, he said, wait a minute, let's talk about the African peoples. And so while he didn't spend very much time in continental Africa, his wife did. His wife wrote My African Journey. She went all around. And that's really important, because I think people fail to realize the synergy and the importance of them together. And then when the United Nations was established, there they are. So you see the Robesons at many of those early meetings and conversations about the United Nations, about the NAACP, and all of these powerful 20th century organizations. So they became voice for global citizenship. They became voice for the power of art to transform the social and the political world. Yet they came from these very traditional, upwardly mobile professions, right? And so, but they used the art to really transcend tragedy. And I love both of them. And when you think of, I don't think of him without thinking of her, because I just believe that we're always better together, men and women, man and wife, or brother and sister, however you think about it, because you need both to navigate the complexity of every situation. And I realize, man, they were a power couple. They were Beyonce and Jay-Z before Beyonce and Jay-Z.
Back then, exactly right. I mean, yeah. So I mean, he was also a bass player. I was just looking also into more information about it. That's why I kept looking down.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's kind of strange. I mean, he had all this talent that he didn't know he had, and he like it's almost like godsend, right? He just needed a, you know, like the
That's right.
alchemist. That kind of just needed to just look around a little bit more, and then he kind of
Or the
found
pot.
himself.
Instead.
Right. I mean, he doesn't really have. I mean, I didn't really read a disturbing background. I mean, was he like? Did he have a challenging background that? Because he kind of looked like the father had more of a challenging background, even
Yes.
if he kind of
I
was
mean,
born.
he was being born in 1898. He was right there at the beginning of the 20th
Right,
century.
of course. Right.
So his, you know, his challenges were tied to racial segregation for sure, but he was
Yeah.
the benefactor of his father's previous tragedy, right? So he
Yeah.
he he would have been that talented 10th in the United States that was seen as able to bootstrap themselves into excellence. I mean, he was probably at the height of his career, the most well regarded um, actor and entertainer in the world.
Wow. I mean, I don't know about you, Jacob, but this is quite an honor that you've even considered talking to us to contribute to his legacy. I don't know what we've done to deserve to even be heard, but for whatever it's worth, we'll try and give you the best we can in these answers.
What is your labor? What is your work? And how do you see your work tied to potentially, especially now that we've had this conversation, the work of social justice in the 21st century?
Well, I'll start. Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm a kid from Africa who's a graphic designer that just made it this far, you know. So I don't know how much my work might even impact social justice. Maybe that's not even the objective, but maybe somehow, some way, uh, down the line, depending on how well we do in our lifetime, you know, people can learn from that story and maybe apply it to their life. But I'll let Jacob speak for himself. But I mean, talent-wise, I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things, I guess, we're all capable of doing as humans, right? Personally speaking, I think I have touched many jobs, you know, from marketing. Uh, that was sort of my first job. To graphic designing, to starting a startup, to taking all the beatings in a startup, to you know, to leading people and actually learning or understanding that maybe leading people is not your best suit and you should do other things, right? I mean, so there's a lot of things I've done throughout my personal life. I do work beyond Barcelona, but everything that I kind of do revolves around designing for myself. I'm a graphic designer. I'm an illustrator more specifically. So I didn't study illustration. I guess similar to Mr. Robeson, but I studied business, right? Your parents take you to school. They gotta get the best bang for their buck. So probably one of the best things you can learn is business administration because it's across the whole board. But I was always, I don't think I was always, I wouldn't say I was interested in art, but I enjoy drawing. So when I learned my first job, I learned about graphic designing, and I quickly picked up that skill from Adobe, from Photoshop all the way to Illustrator. And I think pretty much I've only sort of had a job for about a month in my life. And I think after that, I realized I got the pen, which was the designing component. And I just went out and started designing myself. That was my first startup. It became an advertising company at some point. But then again, it failed. Like most reasons, you're too young to have a company.
I don't think everyone believes that now, but I think that's admirable.
You know how it is. You make smart choices. The same skill kind of led me to the second startup that time, which is now Rosello. And I basically started from the same notion of everything kind of starts with a good design, and then people can understand. So at least I picked up that skill of graphic design, so it was very easy for me to create decks to raise money from investors, to make clients understand what we're doing. So, what maybe a company would have to spend lots of money on, I just had that because of the skill of graphic designing as well. So obviously that, I think Jacob would probably attest, like running Rosella kind of ran the company like a creative agency, right? I focused so much on the beauty and of things, probably more so than the operational part of things. And that's where Jacob kind of came in and really added that value add, because he kind of looked at the business very much on how business should be looked at. There's many ways to describe Africa, right? You could show Africa with, kids starving, flies around them, but that's not Africa. Africa, there's a lot of things about Africa that people do not particularly see. That's that maybe if you're here, maybe if you've kind of gone through some nonsense in your life and you want to make changes, you see life a little bit differently. So, we said, look at this, we need to present our work in a very beautiful, artistic way for Africa. So if you look at our website, you would see everything there is about this. The art, you can obviously tell this company is obviously influenced by art, and our slogan is made in Africa, Jacob? Yeah, made in Africa, right? Again, a company that started from Tanzania, and managed to make it to 4 countries around the world.
Love that. And that's it exactly. And again,
right.
the anthropologist in Atlanta was like, no, this is a misrepresentation of Africa.
Right.
And same with Paul Robeson. They were like, no, this is a misrepresentation. And I went to a talk the other day with Imani Perry about her new book, Black in Blues. And if you look at this image, it's Titus Kafar's, it's one of his pieces, but you see the beauty. And there is something powerful about, in spite of the blues, finding beauty. So Black in Blues is like, there's some darkness, but man, our blues give birth to such beautiful stuff, right? And I'm like, in a 1958 interview, Paul Robeson describes art as a weapon. Let's listen in.
And I have never separated my work as an artist from my work as a human being. I've always put it even more strongly, that to me, my art is always a weapon. It's got to be good art. Othello was a weapon in racial relations, or at least showing that we can do some things too. I played football. My father explained to me that, well, if a fella hit me, I couldn't hit him back because they'd say we were bad and savage. So I had to stand and be knocked all around. I had to do well in my studies. So I've never been able to divorce one thing from the other. And luckily, I don't sing the kind of songs that you're here and you hit the high, whatever it is, the high B flat and the high this and the high that. I sing songs that express very much the emotions of different peoples, like the Welsh, the Scotch, the Negro, Chinese, Russian, and so forth.
We conclude our interview of Natalino and Jacob about the future of Africa.
If you're an artist, you just do your work, and it doesn't really matter what time of day. You just get it done. Yeah.
I love that. Oh my God, I love that. So, okay, Jacob, it must be really easy to be the CEO of this kind of enterprise.
Well, I wouldn't say easy, but I would say exciting and it's exciting opportunity. So, and provide a platform to basically contribute to few or different initiatives. Mm-hmm. So I'll also connect this to your earlier question on how what we do would impact social justice. So I'll just talk on a day-to-day, like how I see that impacts the social justice. So in technology, so for example, what we do basically in technology could be a catalyst also to bring awareness into these issues or things. Because today you see a lot of young people around the world that have some access to technology. And if technology used correctly, they can reach all these different groups, especially women and children. So directly into what we do, I would say how we basically in our small ways probably impacted that arena. So as Nathaniel said, if you go to our website, it said Made in Africa. I would say in our experience, just not many years ago, it was believed we have to go somewhere to get people with high technology skills, not in the continent. And that's that was like the norm. Everyone believed that. And if you had presented somebody who is from here, people would say, "Oh yes," but that kind of belief or trust will be a little bit low. But we Rosello, we kind of like push the boundaries a little bit and say, you know what, there are actually young talents in this country, young men and women who can actually do this, and we put everything aside and start giving opportunity to those talents, and of course they're proven right. So and in what we do, basically we make sure we include women and men in these opportunities, and we give like equal opportunities. So we've seen that working very well across different projects that we do, and yeah, so we can connect that to the social justice or social impact into bringing probably the underserved or the minority, say, voices or groups to get some opportunities. I can also look at it in a different way. We've worked in quite a few projects in health, and we've seen how a very simple technology could have impacted the life of, say, the minority groups, women and children. We ran one project for like 6 years, and this project was basically for pregnant women and women with small kids. But the project was mainly focused in rural areas. So in these rural areas where people have very, very limited access to, say, even the knowledge of good healthcare, let alone accessing a medical facility, but also that basic knowledge of the healthcare. Like if I'm in this situation, what could this mean? And if somebody is pregnant, how often do I need to visit a clinic? Or how often do I need to get checked? And that program that we did, it actually affected over 3 million people.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
and
impact.
and those are actually unique numbers that the product has affected. So we've seen technology in that sense. You touched something on mental health. I don't know if I'm allowed to actually touch that as well.
Oh no, I need to have people understand again the connection. So I would love that.
Yeah, so I would say I'll look at how to actually, for example, from where we are, like mental health is a real thing, like it's everywhere. But the main challenge is the awareness. So there's awareness, number one, and then number two is stigma.
Ooh.
So you have these issues going on around, and probably people will not know, okay, I know I'm feeling this type of way, and I know I've got a problem, but I cannot pinpoint this problem. So that there's no awareness that I have this issue which is recognized, I can go seek help. But second, you could have some sort of an awareness, but there's a stigma. If people know I'm suffering from mental health because from outside I look just fine, it could not look good for me outside. So using technology, number one, technology can easily bring that awareness without people basically go look for it. It can be on your cell phone, in your room, getting all this information easily. But also technology can also be used to basically provide easy access to help. It's like anonymous kind of help. Like I don't have to go to the hospital and knock on the door and people know where am I going to do that. But the platform can be a platform where people could easily access and go there, have this anonymity and share about your problems. And that will bring, I think that also will have some sort of good impact in that area. That's how I see what we do could have an impact in those two areas, the social justice.
How do we dignify the fact that as human beings, we need help and we need each other. And that's the only way we're going to be healthy, right? It's like someone said in a conversation that it's hard to remember that 30 years ago, a lot of people were dying for all kinds of reasons. And again, awareness and stigma was still at the core of that. I think about why we're that way. And I said, if we change just the culture of the way we live as human beings, and if companies and organizations and schools actually made it useful to ask questions, to seek information for good, I think that, yeah, you hit it on the head. Well,
Can I add on to something there?
yes, please.
I've seen, it's pretty interesting now. I think you see it more in America than other parts of the world, but really, really famous people or people that are just adored by many, they're coming out and saying, hey man, I've got issues too. And they own it, I
Mhm.
think that really helps people resonate with that. And it really helps people just, it's almost like making it look cool to just admit that, mental issues is not exactly a bad thing, but we all have it, but it's something that we don't need to ignore, but we need to fix. So like I personally, we all have it, man. Anyway, I don't think there's any perfect human being. I think just some of us have a much harder degree or harder ways of dealing with it, right?
That's right.
But I know Jacob was talking about the stigma. The stigma is real, right? I think it takes a lot of a person to walk out there and be like, hey man, I got some issues in my head, but it really takes a lot. And I think, I don't know if I can speak on behalf of Jacob, but I think even for a person, regardless of where you are at in life, to just be able to just admit that, maybe you don't have to say that you have issues, but like to just say that, hey man, there's no perfect person out there, and we all have issues. Sometimes we go bad days, sometimes we doubt ourselves, sometimes you just don't feel like getting up. Every human being goes through it. I think when more and more people can sort of not pretend they're cool and hide away from the fact that we all have issues, but just kind of become more human about it and be like, yo man, it doesn't matter how great you are, we all got issues, right? And it's okay if if we just, you don't have to talk about it, but it's just okay to admit it. I personally have no problems to say I'm not feeling okay in my head today. I need to, I need some space. I need to think. I'm not okay, man. I need, it's very human. And I think when more and more people can, how you do it is a whole different ballgame. But I think more and more people are just okay.
Feeling okay saying it, yeah.
It starts from the leaders of society or from the artists or from anybody who is famous, I suppose. Because it makes the weaker become more comfortable in accepting when the stronger accept it, right?
That's right. I agree. And I think that there are so many ways to do that, whether it is singing or writing or drawing. When you have that, there is that moment where you need to pause and regather and recover from whatever. That's the way that we, as a people, as human beings, move forward and advance any cause, right? Because it's noise otherwise. Join us for part 2 of our Black History Month episode, where we sit down with Pastor Gregory Smith and Dr. Roberto Schrovaldi to explore their current writing projects and speak to us about texts that change us, this year's theme for programming and events. Please visit our website for more information and to make a donation to the work we are doing to restore the childhood home of Paul Robeson. This is Dr. Joy.